Welcome to today's lecture on implementing feedback loops in AI-driven policy. In this session, we will explore how feedback-driven decision-making can be applied to real-world AI policy challenges. Our objectives today are to understand how to integrate continuous feedback into AI-driven policies, to learn strategies for improving efficiency, accuracy, and fairness in these systems, and to examine the ethical and practical challenges associated with feedback loops in AI governance. Throughout our discussion, I will illustrate key concepts with examples and provide in-depth analysis on how a structured feedback mechanism can transform policy outcomes. To begin, it is important to recognize that traditional policymaking has often relied on static models and one-off evaluations. In contrast, AI-driven policies require a dynamic approach because they operate in an environment that is constantly evolving. The world today is marked by rapid technological advancements, shifting public opinions, and unforeseen challenges that can quickly render old policies ineffective. Thus, the integration of feedback is not simply an optional enhancement, it is a critical component for ensuring that AI systems and the policies that govern them remain relevant and effective. By incorporating continuous feedback, policymakers can refine and adjust AI models in real time, thereby reducing the risk of outdated assumptions and unintended consequences. The process of closing the feedback loop involves several key steps. First, it requires the establishment of mechanisms that allow for regular monitoring of AI outputs and the collection of performance data. This means that rather than setting a policy in stone and then waiting months or years to see its impact, governments must put in place systems that continuously gather information about how an AI-driven policy is performing in practice. Data can be collected from a variety of sources such as system performance metrics, user interactions, and direct public input. These diverse sources of feedback provide a comprehensive view of how the policy is affecting various stakeholders and whether it is achieving its intended outcomes. Once the data is collected, the next step is to analyze it rigorously. This analysis involves identifying any inconsistencies or deviations from expected performance, as well as recognizing trends that may indicate emerging issues. For instance, if an AI system used for resource allocation in public services begins to show signs of bias or inefficiency, continuous monitoring will enable policymakers to detect these issues early on. The feedback loop then requires that these insights be fed back into the system to inform adjustments. In practice, this means that AI models are not static entities, they are designed to evolve based on new data. Automated processes can be established to adjust model parameters as soon as discrepancies are identified, ensuring that the system remains adaptive and responsive to changing conditions. One of the most powerful aspects of feedback loops is that they enable automated adjustments. By automating feedback collection, governments can ensure that real-time data is continuously fed into the decision-making process. Automation minimizes the reliance on manual data entry and reduces the likelihood of human error or bias in the interpretation of feedback. With automated feedback loops, AI systems can adjust their algorithms based on user interactions and operational performance without waiting for periodic human intervention. This results in a more efficient and objective process, allowing policymakers to focus on strategic decisions rather than on routine data processing. Let us now turn to a specific case study that exemplifies the value of feedback loops in AI policy. One notable example is the use of AI in welfare distribution. Many governments have experimented with AI models to allocate social benefits more efficiently, aiming to reduce administrative costs and improve service delivery. However, early implementations of these systems revealed significant challenges. In some cases, the AI models showed biases that led to unequal resource allocation, disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations. These biases were not apparent in the initial design of the system but emerged over time as the models were put into practice. In this particular case, policymakers discovered the bias through a structured feedback collection process. Data was gathered from a variety of channels, including recipient complaints, performance metrics from the AI system, and independent audits. The collected feedback revealed that certain groups were being underserved by the system. Once these issues were identified, the next step was to take corrective action. Policymakers engaged in iterative improvements, which involved refining the data inputs and adjusting the model parameters to correct the bias. The system was not discarded, instead, it was improved by learning from the feedback. Continuous monitoring was then implemented to ensure that the adjustments had the desired effect and that the bias did not reappear. This case study clearly demonstrates how a well-structured feedback loop can uncover hidden problems and lead to significant improvements in AI-driven policies. The iterative process allowed for real-time adjustments, ensuring that the system became fairer and more effective over time. It is a clear example of how feedback can be used not only to maintain performance but also to enhance the overall fairness and equity of AI systems. When policymakers are willing to listen to feedback and act on it, they can transform potentially flawed systems into robust tools for public good. Despite the clear benefits of implementing feedback loops in AI governance, there are also significant challenges and ethical considerations that must be addressed. One major challenge is the risk of misinformation. AI systems often rely on data that can be incomplete, biased, or even deliberately manipulated. If inaccurate or misleading information is fed into the system, it may lead to flawed conclusions and misguided policy decisions. To mitigate this risk, it is essential to have robust mechanisms for filtering and verifying the sources of feedback. This involves not only using automated tools to detect anomalies in the data, but also ensuring that human oversight is in place to interpret the results accurately. Another challenge is the potential for bias in the feedback collection process itself. If the feedback being collected comes disproportionately from certain segments of the population, the AI model may learn to favor those viewpoints while neglecting others. This can exacerbate existing inequalities and result in policies that do not serve all citizens fairly. To prevent this, policymakers must design their data collection strategies to include a diverse range of voices. This might involve using multiple channels to gather feedback and ensuring that the sample of respondents is representative of the entire population. Additionally, special attention must be paid to the voices of marginalized and underrepresented groups, as their input is often critical in identifying systemic issues that may otherwise be overlooked. Transparency and accountability are also crucial when implementing feedback loops in AI-driven policies. Citizens have a right to understand how their feedback is being used and how it is influencing policy decisions. Governments must establish clear guidelines and protocols that explain the feedback process, how data is collected and analyzed, and how adjustments are made based on that data. Providing public access to performance metrics, audit reports, and other relevant documentation can help build trust between citizens and the government. When people see that their input leads to tangible improvements and that the process is conducted in an open and accountable manner, they are more likely to engage with the system and contribute meaningful feedback. Moreover, the ethical implications of automating feedback loops must not be overlooked. While automation can increase efficiency and reduce bias in data processing, it can also lead to over-reliance on machine-driven decisions without adequate human intervention. It is important to strike a balance between automated systems and human judgment. Ethical oversight should be an integral part of the feedback loop, with regular audits and reviews to ensure that the system remains fair and does not inadvertently perpetuate existing biases. Policymakers must remain vigilant in monitoring the ethical dimensions of AI systems and be prepared to intervene when necessary to protect the rights and interests of all citizens. In summary, implementing feedback loops in AI-driven policy is a multifaceted process that requires careful planning, execution, and oversight. The integration of continuous feedback into AI systems is essential for ensuring that policies remain effective, adaptive, and equitable. By establishing mechanisms for regular data collection, automating feedback processes, and analyzing performance metrics, governments can create dynamic policies that respond in real time to changing conditions. The case study on AI in welfare distribution illustrates the tangible benefits of feedback loops, demonstrating how iterative improvements can correct biases and enhance policy outcomes. As we look ahead, it is clear that the future of policymaking will increasingly depend on our ability to harness the power of AI and feedback-driven decision-making. In an era of rapid technological change and evolving societal needs, static policies are no longer sufficient. Instead, adaptive governance that embraces continuous improvement will be the key to addressing complex challenges and ensuring that public policies serve the common good. Throughout today's lecture, we have examined the importance of closing the feedback loop, analyzed a case study that highlights the practical application of these principles, and discussed the challenges and ethical considerations that must be navigated in the process. It is my hope that you now have a deeper understanding of how feedback loops can be implemented in AI-driven policies to drive continuous improvement, enhance fairness, and maintain transparency. As future policymakers, your ability to integrate real-time feedback into decision-making will be a cornerstone of effective governance in the digital age. In closing, remember that feedback is not just a mechanism for correcting errors, it is a vital tool for innovation and growth. By listening to the data, learning from it, and making the necessary adjustments, you can ensure that your policies are not only responsive to current needs but also resilient enough to meet future challenges. The journey toward adaptive and equitable governance is ongoing, and the implementation of effective feedback loops is a critical step in that direction. Thank you for your attention today. I encourage you to reflect on the concepts we discussed and consider how you might apply these principles in your future work. By embracing feedback-driven decision-making, you can help build a more responsive, transparent, and just society. I look forward to our continued discussions on how to harness the power of AI for public good, and I am confident that, together, we can create policies that truly serve the needs of all citizens.